So joining us today, we have Andrew Hoog, co-founder and board member of NowSecure. We have Tom Tovar, CEO and co-creator of Appdome. We have my colleague, Eric Newcomer, CTO and principal analyst at Intellyx. And let's kick this off with some industry context for us. So we're focusing on mobile security today. And if you think about mobile devices, today, most people interact with their mobile devices when they interact digitally. So 90% of people spend people spend 90% of their digital time using their mobile devices. So even though we're on computers some of the time, and we may be on computers at work, when we talk about consumers, they spend a vast majority of their digital time in front of some sort of mobile device. So from the perspective of the businesses serving these consumers, more than half of their brand revenue and engagement is with the mobile apps. So from the business perspective, mobile apps are a huge revenue channel for businesses that serve consumers. Furthermore, Appdome, one of our guests today, did a 3-year study that showed consumers care about protections in their mobile apps, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, clearly, we don't want to have hackers interfere with our mobile sessions or take over our phones or leverage our phones to steal data or other problems. So this is a concern that consumers have as well as the businesses that serve them. So that's sort of a bit of context. So let's get started with some questions. So start off with you, Andrew. So NowSecure recently published some news about the lack of protections in consumer-facing mobile apps. So can you share a bit more information on that?
Yeah, sure. So at NowSecure, we do automated mobile app security testing, and really it's more than just securities. It's looking at risks, more broadly. And we've been doing this for a very long time. So because it's automated, we have scale, and we have, I think, over 1 million apps in our database that we've looked at. And there are a lot of just kind of common protections, platform protections that exist that most apps just don't enable. I often tell people that mobile apps can actually be more secure than a desktop app or a traditional web app, because this is a much newer platform. And so not only did we get to kind of stand on the shoulder of giants and build a better new implementation, but we have a combination of hardware-backed features, like where you could securely store sensitive data, just things that are baked into this platform. And the operating system vendors themselves, Google and Apple, have built in a lot of protections. But as we look at all of the apps that are out there, so few of them are actually taking advantage of all of the different controls that they have at their disposal. So there's just a very big disconnect between kind of what is possible, but what we're actually seeing implemented in apps.
So Tom, Appdome does some work in this area as well. What are you finding in terms of the situation? Are you finding it's consistent with what Andrew was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly, so we likewise, as part of our service to our customers, sometimes we're asked to do an evaluation of an application just to understand kind of its starting point and what sort of defenses are in there, et cetera. So we've done maybe about 1,800 of these over the course of several years, and it does shock me that usually what we end up finding is nothing. Usually what we end up finding is no defenses in the application. Sometimes we find basic things like certificate pinning, things of that nature, SSL pinning or server-side pinning, things of that nature. But there's usually not a lot, and it's sort of what led us to kind of do our 3-year study on consumers. I think there is in some ways kind of a lack of understanding of the risks that could happen. I think that's changing because consumers, I think, are bringing brands forward on that topic and helping brands understand that it is something that's very valuable to them in how they experience. But yes, I would say our findings are very consistent that even a lot of the brands that you probably use on a daily basis, you'd be surprised to know that simple things like protecting your user credentials or protecting your credit card information or protecting your transactions or personal information that's in the application, there's not defenses in the application to safeguard those things. So I would say it's very consistent.
So, Eric, let's bring you into the discussion. Is this situation with the lack of security in mobile apps, does this shock you at all? Where do you think we are as an industry in protecting the mobile business overall?
Well, I spent 2 years as head of security architecture for a city consumer bank. I have 2 words to say to start this off, which is security reviews. There are people in the organizations that understand the challenges and the risks and the vulnerabilities of the apps, but they end up doing security reviews sometimes at the last minute to try to ensure the protections are in place. Some of the issue is that the developers are rushing for time to market, especially in the mobile area. Time to market is crucial. There's a lot of pressure, as we had at Citibank, to get mobile apps out there to be competitive. And security is one of those things that devs may not know a lot about, or they may think that's optional. They may not understand all the risks. And you end up as a security role in these companies, trying to point out what the risks are and figuring out a good way to remediate them. So there's this kind of environment where some people in these organizations will understand these risks, but they may not be within the mainstream of the delivery of the apps enough to ensure the protections are there.
So, Andrew, you've been in this industry for quite a while. What are your thoughts on why there's still such a struggle to protect the mobile business? I mean, you'd think this problem would already be solved by now, right?
Yeah, sometimes I have to kind of pinch myself and say, why are we still kind of Sisyphus, pushing a rock up a hill? I think there are 2 or 3 reasons that really drive this. First of all, mobile took off fairly quickly. I mean, I know it's been around for a while now, but it took off fairly quickly. And so as companies were struggling with all of their other IT systems and digital transformations, here was this kind of shining light that took off, engagement skyrocketed in where we're at today. So it's kind of been on that path. But as Eric was mentioning, people really stopping to think about the security implication doesn't happen as often. The second, and maybe the biggest driver, is a lot of people have this grave misunderstanding about what Apple and Google do in their review process. A lot of them believe that Apple and Google are looking for security vulnerabilities. And what I point out is really what Apple and Google are looking for are malware and some egregious violations. But if you look at the model, the financial model, the revenue model behind app stores, billions and billions of dollars are made. So if they were to set the bar and even capable of doing the testing or the types of defenses that us in Appdome do, many of those apps would actually fall out. And so there would be a significant revenue impact. So it's kind of like they're looking for, malware and egregious mistakes. A lot of people say, well, we think they're security testing, and they're simply not. And I think a lot of this stems is, I think, a little bit more broadly, and I've spent a lot of time recently looking at like 10Ks and 8Ks and thinking about like kind of the strategic alignment companies have. There's basically a misalignment. When you read 10Ks and you look at what is the purpose of a business, how do they make their revenue, and then you look down to their cybersecurity sections, which are now required as of late last year, there's a huge disconnect. And so we're seeing like tremendous value to the company being driven through their strategy around mobile. And a very, very small percentage of them are even thinking about it from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so there's always grave danger there when there's a misalignment between the strategic value and kind of the systemic risk that cybersecurity can propose. And so I think people need to have awareness, is what it really boils down to, and kind of connecting the dots of like 50 to 70% of your interactions and revenue, or potentially revenue for some customers, are going through this channel. Are you doing anything bespoke around testing and protecting and defending that? And I think the answer is generally no.
Yes, this is interesting. So we have the digital priorities that organizations are facing that are driving mobile app development and mobile adoption across the consumer landscape. And then we have regulatory and risk management priorities that are driving cybersecurity efforts. But these aren't properly aligned, which is really sort of shocking, because you would think that if you have 2 strategic priorities that you would align them. It sort of goes without saying. But so Tom, what is your perspective on this? Why is the industry still struggling to protect the mobile business in this context of digital priorities and regulatory and risk management priorities?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love this conversation because each of us brings a different perspective to it. Eric lived it on the business side and the cyber side, kind of looking at how do we solve this on an operational level. Andrew's company has sort of sprung up really to kind of solve this. How do you even evaluate this risk, right, in an efficient, automated way to help people understand and open folks' eyes to it. obviously for us, we joined the fray a little bit later, about 7 years ago, to kind of solve the remediation side of the house. So, but we're all kind of coming at this, and I think we're all growing as the industry opens up. I'd really break down the struggles to kind of three things that I think are standing in the way of getting to a place where consumers and the workforce are actually protected by this. So the first is resources. Organizations, in order to build security into a mobile application, you've got to have very specialized engineers. Mobile developers are awesome. I'm a mobile developer, so yay, love mobile developers. But developers are not one big monolithic group of people where everybody does everything. You have back end, you have front end, you have Android, you have iOS, you have different disciplines within the engineering community. And a lot of times just having the resources to focus on and build security right is not within the purview of the organization that's building that application. And so they struggle with just finding somebody to be able to do that. The second piece is complexity. As Andrew points out, I mean, if you really think about it, if you're a brand and you're thinking about what is the most secure channel I can offer my consumers, right? Mobile would probably give you, just from a platform perspective, way more ability to offer a secure experience and interaction modality than web. But the converse is also true. To get to that place that mobile provides, right, for you as a platform, you've got to overcome quite a bit of complexity. iOS is, I don't want to say easier, but think about Android with all of its different variants of Androids out there and all of its different devices and all of the different OEMs that come in. It's a very complex platform to code to build to test to release to, etc. And so it presents quite a bit of complexity in terms of how apps are built, what languages they're built in, what coding languages, what frameworks, what SDKs are in those applications, etc. So that's the kind of the second thing. And then the third thing would be the diversity of attacks. Just the attack surface inside mobile applications is just so big. It's just so varied. I mean, when we started this journey, we thought everything was about RASP, but RASP is not everything anymore. I mean, we started off with, maybe like, I think it was like 20, 30 protections. And now we're over 300, moving to 400 different defenses, because the attack surface is just so big in mobile. What fraudsters and attackers are doing inside mobile apps is some very, very sophisticated things, that have very, very damaging consequences if left unchecked. So I think when you really look at the challenge, it's not that we're not aware. It's not that awareness is growing. Either consumers are pulling the brands towards it, or great companies like NowSecure is stepping up to saying, hey, we're going to illuminate this challenge for you guys. And by the way, testing vendors, certainly NowSecure being a leader in it, is evolving its methodologies to catch all these sophisticated things that are going out there. So we're gaining awareness, right? Ultimately, now we're at this point where delivery becomes a big challenge. And there's where we hit resources, complexity, and diversity of attack. That kind of is like a really, really big kind of thing. So we see brands that come to us and say, hey, we've tried this thing. We tried to do it. We're not doing it well. We can't deliver on the promise. We can't deliver on our brand promise. And we need to deliver on our brand promise, and we need a way to do that. And so that, I think, is, for me at least, and maybe it's just where I sit, maybe it's just where our company sits, that we see that when they come to us, they have pain in their eyes, and they're like, hey, we're having problems getting this done. We want to, the intention is there. We're a good brand. We care about our users. We care about our workforce. We care about it. We want to do more. We need help. We need help doing this in an efficient way. So that's what I would say.
Tom, I'm gonna make a quick comment on attack surface, very brief. I think a lot of people overlook something really important, which is that in a traditional web app, you write a bunch of code, APIs, you stick it behind firewalls and WAFs and all kinds of layers of control. when a customer, when a customer of ours, when a company releases their mobile app, the entire sum total of their mobile app is existing in a single zip file. And the ability for an attacker, as well as us, both from a testing standpoint, from a defense standpoint, to download that and effectively inspect it, I don't want to say it's trivial. I mean, we've automated it, so it's trivial to us, but it's well within the reach of attackers. And so, people fail to understand how much of their internals around what are your APIs, what is the structure call, what sort of tokens are used. Sometimes people bundle those tokens in. So there's this big misunderstanding, several big key misunderstandings, not just that Apple and Google are testing it. All of your code is public, and many folks don't realize that. So I just wanted to add to the attack surface side.
Yeah, that reminds me of something else that Tom mentioned about the RASP. That's how we first came to know about Appdome at Citi. It was a RASP in the app. So what you're saying, Andrew, is it's in the app, you got to have protection. And that's what was attracted to us about Appdome when we first heard about it. And I remember being on the evaluation team going, what do you mean RASP in the app? Yeah. Well, there it is. It was not existing at the time. There's no solution like that. Well, but if we get back to the broader question, it's a matter for me of timing and automation. We have people in projects who would come to us, like the Google Plex project. We were mapping GPay to the Citi bank accounts. They came to us very early on, and we had a chance to design the security and create a security design as part of the project. We had other projects coming to us within 2 weeks of production saying, can you do the security review and sign off for us? And, oh, well, you haven't done authentication right. You haven't done encryption right. Oh, boy. And then there's a big conflict and there's a big fight. And you run into these conflicting priorities of time to market versus security. And fortunately, at Citi, the data of the customer data was really something that had to be protected at all costs. So usually we would win that, but it was not a fun contest. And many times it would be compromises and half measures and mitigations and accepting of risks that would be done later, fixed later. And so we thought the best solution was automation to try to get security work into the project as soon as possible in the development automation pipeline. And that was another very attractive thing for us about Appdome. We could do that, and we could have security reviews, which I kind of mentioned as this unifying concept here, as the review of the automation output, which would really help us sort of solve this issue of how do we make sure security has been done correctly in the project.
So one of the key best practices to incorporating security into any software, whether it's mobile or otherwise, is essentially to build secure software to begin with, right? I mean, it's one thing to run a review or get your security team involved at the end of a development project, but what you really want to do is shift left, right? Shifting left meaning toward the beginning of the project. So I'd like to pose this question to Andrew. Have shift left strategies helped mobile brands and development teams? Is that part of the solution here? And if so, sort of how does it fit into this story?
Short answer is absolutely. Developers, I'm a developer myself. Nobody wants to write bugs in their code, whether they're security, privacy, or functional bugs. And so the more that we can shift left, one, we catch it early. Everybody knows the studies out there in terms of catching it early is the cheapest time to fix it. Two, there's a tremendous opportunity to educate. Those are learning moments, right? And so for a developer to be able to see what had happened, to get the remediation, to pair it up with a video from like NowSecure Academy is a really powerful moment to kind of help shape, where things are headed. From a regulatory standpoint, the ability to come back to regulators or other, requirements that you have out there showing that you're doing automated testing. This is becoming, more and more important. So that shift left mentality is critical. And part of the thing that we're doing is we're even asking, can we shift even further left of what in the dev world we call like the pull request, where the developer uploads their code to the build system? Because again, nobody really wants to be embarrassed, right? But could we run scans static quickly? Could we take our NowSecure SDK and embed it into the app so that the developer is getting effectively, I made this change, I push it to my phone, I do a couple of things, I see the telemetry come out right away. Oh, that's not right, I'm gonna fix that. So the further left we get, the more powerful we get in terms of cost-effective, helping the developer solve it and show them how to do it properly in the future. And then all of that build up around the best practices and the regulatory and the risk management that will roll up ultimately, as we talked earlier, to those strategic objectives and saying, we're taking this critical resource and we're truly investing in the security of it.
So Eric, from with your experience in financial services, was shift left something that was practical to achieve? What are your experience? What is your experience with shift left in the real world, as it were, and its pros and cons?
Well, as I was saying before, it somewhat varied by project as to how early on somebody would think about security and how able we were to convince them to shift left. Our idea in the security architecture team generally was to put a framework in place that would help the developers shift left by identifying the libraries, the code libraries, the security policies, the security controls that they needed to put into their applications, make it available to them, give them some training, help them understand how to put it in. But of course, they had to be willing to work with us. We had to even know what they were doing. Sometimes we didn't even know project, or sometimes we would find out an API was in production and exposed to the web because it was under attack. They would never tell us. But if they would work with us, we would show them the libraries, the policies, the controls to put in place, help them put it in place early on in the pipeline, and then use the output of the automation to conduct the security reviews. That was our ideal. And some cases we got there, in some cases we didn't. And again, Appdome was a fit in that model very well. It's something you can include in the CI/CD pipeline. It's one of those controls for mobile apps. Actually, multiple controls for mobile apps can be done that way. So that fit our strategy very, very well.
So building security into the applications is obviously an important best practice, but we still have to have proper relationship between the mobile dev team and the cybersecurity team. So Tom, can you give us any insight into what goes on between these two teams on a release by release basis?
Oh, you want me to handle the hot topic? That's nice.
Yeah, why not?
Nobody better.
Yeah, I'd say first off to kind of piggyback off what Andrew's talking about and what Eric's talking about. Like I definitely think shift left has been a value to everyone. I think the more we shift left, not only in degree of left, but in terms of the processes that we shift. If we can not only test the application, but build the security into it, which is obviously where we come into the play, we come into the picture. We do more, right? We do more to keep the mobile application user, brand, revenue, et cetera, safe. So, our view on that was to plug into the entire dev ecosystem. So testing suites, crash suites, CI/CD suites, whatever, is to really kind of plug into the whole ecosystem over there so that small brands and large brands alike can get the defenses that they need out into the market. I think it's a fascinating time, for just as an aside, to be in this space if you're in cyber or in dev. It's an unprecedented period, I think, where collaboration can really kind of emerge and allow these two groups that were otherwise at odds with one another. When you think about their objectives, on the dev side, you want to build a great experience, you want to build a great app, you want to get it out quickly, you need to iterate fast, you need to get it to the app store, get people to download it, market it, and so forth. And cyber's view of the world is we got to protect everything. We got to make sure every critical step in that application workflow, not every step in the application workflow, but every critical step in the application workflow needs to be protected. And sometimes those are at odds. And, without automation and without technology stepping in, you face these, problems of resource and complexity and diversity. One thing always seemed to pop up, and we talk about this a lot with our customers, and I think even Eric experienced this a little bit, is risk waivers. You get into these really kind of tug of war situations where the app's got to get out the door. The cyber objective has not been met because you don't have the resources, you can't overcome the complexity, and you can't deal with the diversity, right? And something's got to give. And at the end of the day, what ends up happening is the business doesn't give. The business says, okay, get the app out the door because we need to generate revenue and get users. And the cyber function is left to say, okay, I will allow that to happen this one go around, but you need to.
Yeah, we used to spend a lot of our time on risk exceptions, and part of the security architecture function is to help explain and give the trade-offs on those risk exceptions as to how severe they might be, how long you might go with them. So that's a big part of the solution, but you try to avoid that as much as you
Oh, yeah.
can.
Well, and look, don't get me started on SolarWinds, but in the case of
Right.
SolarWinds, yeah, obviously the SEC came in and used risk acceptance waivers against the company and said, look, you knew and didn't do anything. So my advice in all of this is, this is an unprecedented time for collaboration and coming together of the dev team and the cyber team. You've got to have platforms to be able to do that. You've got to have platforms where there's transparency, where there's visibility, where there's management and there's control in order to be able to orchestrate kind of the entire release process. Fast forward to today to large organizations like the kind that Eric came from, you have a cyber team or an architecture team, whatever, or a DevOps team or a DevSecOps team that has Appdome in the pipeline and is managing security policies for hundreds, maybe thousands of applications, downstream, and being able to use kind of an open, transparent type platform to be able to collaborate with each development team and say, okay, this is going to be our defense model for this app, and this is the defense model for that app, and so forth. It's a very interesting moment in time where you're really starting to bring people together, and really starting to see a lot more kind of working together rather than being kind of what used to be kind of at odds with each other. So I'm hopeful. Maybe that's a good. Maybe I talked around the topic, but I think I want to stay. I think there's a lot that we can that dev and cyber can do together. As a developer myself and a hacker, I have it in me to kind of help folks bring it together. So yeah, that's what I would say.
So collaboration is an important theme here, but automation also came up in a few of your comments. So Eric, I'd like to, you mentioned automation as well. I wanted you to drill down just a bit. How well did automation actually address some of these mobile security problems? And, what were some of the results that you saw in practice?
Again, it varied. Before I went into the security role, I was chief architect for Treasury and Trade, and 1 year I put in 27 CI/CD pipelines to start the automation process.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a stretch goal we had. Anyway, well, kind of mistake we made at that time that sort of informed some of the future work was we implemented the existing development process in the automated pipeline, because the orchestration pipelines are very flexible and you can adapt them to the release process. And each app team tended to have their own release process, which was part of the challenge of implementing security automation as well. So we would have some success with those teams that were better able to automate their process. Some of the teams would not get the concept and they would stop the automation and say, well, we have a manual check here that we have to go and do. And I'd say, what don't you understand about the word automation? You are not doing manual checks here, you are automating. The teams that could do it, though, were shining a light that others would follow. So I think the success, probably has grown since I left, but we were able to get some of the teams to be successful, and those were the ones who were more able to automate more successfully, understand, and perhaps there were more recent apps in the mobile space. You'd have newer apps and newer teams coming along that were more modern facing. And so you would definitely have your share of apps that were very successful this way. And we thought it was the blueprint for how to go forward with the security for mobile apps, make it all as automated as possible.
So no discussion in 2024 would be complete without a mention of artificial intelligence. So Andrew, I'd like to pose to you, with all this hype around AI, what is the role of AI in this story especially of automation? Is AI now helping with this automation, or is AI about supporting the developers? And what is the role of the developers who are focusing on mobile security, and how can AI help them do their jobs?
Yeah, I've been fortunate that I've been using AI, basically GitHub's Copilot, for over a year now. And so I'll talk personally and then a little more broadly. When I first started using it, sadly, even though I've been a developer for 30 years almost, I had actually never written a full-blown mobile app, which was hard to imagine. And so I decided to go write an iOS app for Hacker News. And I went out there, I did a little bit of research online, took a little bit of a course, and then I just dove in with Copilot. And the interesting thing was, I was able to write the app, which is great. It was up and running and I had it on my phone, et cetera. But an interesting side story was I spent an entire day going down a rabbit hole that I didn't understand. And it was a very subtle difference between making a call to Google's Firebase with, a newer version versus an older version of the service that they offer. And because I lacked any real knowledge about Swift, I didn't see the error, and it took me a day to find it. Juxtapose that to what I do on a day-to-day basis. I write a lot of Node and things of that sort, and I can use AI to just, my velocity is crazy because I know this language well, and so I can spot bugs. So there still are issues that get introduced. So I think, my broader takeaways, one, I think that developers are going to start writing code faster. I think that if the developers are less experienced with that language, or in general, there's a high, degree of likelihood that there will be bugs introduced. And I think those bugs could both be subtle functional bugs. It could be security issues. It could be privacy issues. And it's going to be hard to spot. And so, if the app crashes, it's great because there's a problem, you got to go fix it. But what about these more subtle things, right, that just float by and you didn't realize they happen? 50 to 60% of mobile apps are third-party SDKs. So there's a lot going on in these mobile apps, right? They're going to start writing code faster. Like, you have to be able to keep your eye on these things. And so I think, automation is a critical component to that. You have to understand what automation is great at. It's great at doing a set number of tasks very consistently at scale in a cost-effective way. But it can't do interesting things like what humans do in pen tests, right? Where we may take a token and we might do a replay attack and we may bounce over here. So to me, the push in from AI from a coding standpoint is going to be higher code velocity, less understanding, and more bugs introduced, including security and privacy. We can use automation to address some of that, but we always have to continue to have some sort of human in the loop, in my opinion. And I think that, if companies don't confront this head on, they're going to get passed by, or things are simply going to happen and they're not going to be managing that downside risk. So I think it is a significant impact. And I think automation plays a key role at building that safety net, as basically more and more code gets introduced at a higher velocity, perhaps with kind of a less deep understanding from a developer base.
So Tom, what's your perspective on automation? I mean, how much can be automated, or is it more a situation like Eric was describing where you automate until you stop and do a check, and then you automate until you stop and do a check, which sort of defeats the whole purpose. So what's your perspective overall?
Yeah, so I mean, our entire platform is built around the concept of automation. I'm a firm believer in it. When I looked at this market, I looked at the other tools that were out there, the other not platforms, the other products that are out there, a lot of point solutions. When I was building my own applications, mobile applications, I tried using some of those other products and I found them. Everything else in my pipeline was automated except that. And so I went to kind of the venture capital community and I said, I want to build a vending machine. I want to build a vending machine for mobile app defense. And no joke, I said Carvana is a vending machine, Appdome should be a vending machine. And they were like, that's ridiculous. Nobody can do that. But I think you have to look at what automation is and what it's not, right? So automation is not a script. That's not automation, right? That's not automation. It's not an app wrapper. That was a kind of a thing there for a while in like the 90s. It's not that. Automation is a system to system ability to output, a set of things, whatever those things are. And they can be very complex things. I mean, in the case of Appdome, again, 340 different defenses, turn them all on and a system will code those and build those for you. Andrew's right. It's not a creative system. It's not going to build an app for you. You're not going to come and say, hey, just open-ended, right? It's as long as you have the ability to select and produce, right, inside of a workflow system, inside of a pipeline system, that's automation. And I think, automation solves a lot of things. It solves certainly for resources. It solves for complexity. It solves for diversity. Andrew's company was built on that premise as well. At some level, yes, you have manual pen testers and they're wonderful, sophisticated, creative individuals and humans, but there's a certain amount of the scanning process that you can automate and that can speed up how you deliver and how you discover and how you uncover kind of what you need to fix. In our case, like what I tell our customers is, look, we don't build build amazing applications. Our customers do. We're not on that side of the house. Our job is to protect them. So you select the things that are valuable to you and valuable to your business, and our system will produce those for you in your application. And you can get very, very, very complex outcomes in a very, very, very short period of time. That if you tried to do it with humans would take you forever and maybe not even ever get there. So I also believe that you will see, and you certainly will see from us, the entry of AI into that process. So automation can be benefited by AI in lots of ways, not only in attack detection and response, but in recommendations, in guidance for what to deploy, even things like auto build. So you can imagine a world where you have an application that's in a pipeline, and instead of making selections on a platform that to generate outputs, right? A machine does that for you. A machine says, oh, based on your application, I think you should do this, and you just set it on autopilot. And all of a sudden, your defense model is automatically generated in your pipeline without you having to interact with it. You'll get an output, you'll get a receipt, you'll have visibility, transparency, control if you want to change things, but a machine is going to start to do this for you over time. So I think, when you really, really take automation to its proper end, right, you get to a point where humans are kind of like airplanes these days. I'm fascinated. I was sitting next to this individual who is an engineer for the automatic pilots and so forth, and he explained a day where we would be flying flying from San Francisco to New York, and there would be nobody in the cockpit but basically an admin person making sure that the lights were on, and I was like, wow, that's amazing, and I told my fiance the other night, I was running at night in our neighborhood, and a driverless car went by me, in the middle of the night, just driving by me and going around all the streets and so forth. And I said, wow, what a fascinating world we live in. I think automation has that potential inside the pipeline. And I know that for us, we're committed to it. And I'm sure Andrew and his team are over there as well. So that's what I would say.
Well, Tom, I'm glad you survived that encounter with a driverless car at night.
I know. It didn't take me out. It didn't take me out. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's almost time for a Q&A. So Eric, I wanted to pose the last question to you. Tell us a bit about your Intellyx white paper that you wrote for Appdome, ending the conflict between mobile, dev, and sec, and then wrap up with a few final comments, if you would.
Oh gosh, that was really a fun white paper to write, and I thank Tom for a great collaboration. He mentioned collaboration, and certainly we had a good collaborative experience there. And it was structured around this security review concept, how often in my security architecture role, an application team would approach us near the end of the development cycle and say, could you please sign off on this? We need the security sign off to go to production. And we would be put in a very awkward position of having sometimes to say, or very often to say no, because they hadn't contacted us early enough, they hadn't thought early enough, and they hadn't followed the policies and guidelines and requirements of the secure environment that City had set. So we were thinking that the best way to resolve this was to shift left, give the developers the help they needed as early in the life cycle as possible. This would depend, of course, on the project team being willing to work with us and understanding that they needed to, and sometimes that was the case, as I mentioned, and sometimes it wasn't. But in that context, for the mobile apps in particular, Appdome was something that we brought in, and that really assisted with this whole shift left process. And I think Tom described it very well, where we had the chance for the security team and the development team to sit down together and look at what protections needed to be introduced in the mobile app and set that all up in the automation process so that it became a part of the application, and delivery process. And I think that's really important. And I think when we started out this webinar, we talked about the fact that a lot of these protections exist and people don't really know about them or understand how to use them. And things like this automated approach where developers and security teams are able to sit down together and figure it out is going to be very, very important going forward. And, I just briefly want to touch on the AI as well. I think Tom summarized that very well as well. And, Andrew mentioned the development aspect, but the aspect that seems most interesting to me is this analysis aspect. We get a lot of information in security from all the security monitoring and alerting tools, but that needs to be analyzed and turned into actionable intelligence. And this is, I think, a big part of what we're seeing in the marketplace in the security area as the next step forward.
Well, very good. It's a great discussion. So let's take a few questions from our audience. We have time for just a few, but if you want to ask a question, just click on the Q&A button there on your screen and feel free to ask a question. So one question, one of the terms that hasn't come up today, which is a bit surprising, is DevSecOps. So I'd like to put it to both Tom and Andrew. Do Appdome or NowSecure, do you position your tools as DevSecOps? Do you have DevSecOps tools, or generally, what is your DevSecOps story? So, Tom, why don't we start with you?
No, go ahead. Andrew would be the best.
Andrew, okay.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, sure. Yeah, so we're tightly integrated into the DevSecOps process. We do help companies test apps that they use, and so people come to us and say we use 1,000 or 10,000 apps. It has our sensitive data, our customer data, so we can help you with third-party risk management supply chain. But a big part of what we do is we'll integrate directly in the DevSecOps. So when a developer makes a pull request, when a build is cut, whatever the frequency is, we'll go ahead and do combinations of static analysis, dynamic analysis, and then we'll present those results back to the developer and the security team. So 100% just directly integrated in is a big part of what we do.
Yeah, and on the Appdome side, we come in on the remediation side. So, a lot of times our customers will bring to us a NowSecure test or a pen test, et cetera, and say, or they have a large backlog or a lot of release risk acceptance waivers, and it's gotten to the point where it's kind of overloaded or outstripped the engineering team's ability to deliver on those. And they'll come to us and say, hey, look, we need a way to clear these things quickly. And so we will come in, obviously showcase our product and allow people to kind of select the features, use the recipe from a DevSecOps evaluation, use the recipe inside of our platform, turn on the things they need, build the application and remediate those instantly. So I think if you're sort of looking for kind of automation to automation, certainly NowSecure automates the evaluation side, the discovery side, et cetera. We automate the remediation and delivery side of the house. So that's kind of where we sit in. Okay.
Oh, very, very good. So we have time for one more question. So this question concerns compliance. I know the focus of this talk was on security, but compliance, especially compliance enforcement and how that can be automated, is a closely related topic. So, and the example that the one person used was healthcare. So it could be healthcare protection logs in the UK, or it could be HIPAA in the US. So what are the NowSecure or Appdome stories around compliance, and how does compliance fit into this mobile security story?
Yep. Andrew?
Oh, sure. Thanks. No, compliance is a critical part. Obviously, compliance is not security, but it's a big part of what we do, and it's a way that we assure the market and regulators. So I would say a couple of quick things. One, we believe very much in OWASP mobile app security project. We hired one of the two leaders of that so that instead of doing it nights and weekends, he can actually do it for a large part of his day job. And so we invest heavily in standards and make sure that each one of our findings are tagged as standards. And for certain ones, we have bespoke reports so that you could say, look, I need to comply with this particular standard. The other thing that we do that's really important is that most people have to realize that we want to find security issues, but we also want to find things like privacy issues. And so you could have an app, let's say a healthcare app like the question had, where one of those third-party SDKs that you've included, you didn't realize it inadvertently took PHI and sent it. So if you're only looking at the app and you're only seeing the encrypted data, you would never notice that. And there have been issues here in the US with the FDA, and others have taken action against companies. You are responsible for what all of that code does, even though you have no visibility to it. And so what we do is we're able to look inside those encrypted channels, and in particular for a healthcare type scenario, we're able to show you all of the PII, all of the PHI, and where it's going, which is a critical part to managing risks in a healthcare environment.
Yep. And on the Appdome side, I would say, yes, we work with healthcare applications. Yes, we can help you protect the application in a way that allows you to be compliant with, whether it's UK laws or HIPAA laws here in the United States. One thing I will say about compliance, compliance is a lifecycle effort within an organization. One is making sure you have the features or protections you need in the mobile application. The next is to be able to certify that you've met those objectives. In other words, report to whomever that might be asking, whether it's an internal audit team or external audit or what have you. And then the third thing is to be able to monitor those protections in a production environment and look for, as Andrew says, other active attack surfaces that are live inside your application and respond to those in real time. So with Appdome, you have that ability to not only code and deliver the protections, certify them, monitor them, and respond in cycle. I like to say the best DevSecOps scan or pen test you can have is one that you pass. So with Appdome, our goal is to help make sure that you pass those hurdles, and the same is true for any compliance objective that you might have, whether it's HIPAA, PCI, DSS, whatever it is in the healthcare market, outside the healthcare market, etc. So yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you very much. That's all the time we have. So thanks to Tom Tovar of Appdome, Andrew Hoog of NowSecure, and Eric Newcomer, my colleague at Intellyx. And thanks to you, the audience, for joining us in our journey to building a more secure mobile economy. So there's obviously a lot more progress that needs to be made, but with the automation tools like Appdome and NowSecure, at least there's a leg up in order to solve these very difficult problems for enterprises and for the consumers and businesses that are their clients. So we hope at Intellyx that automation is just the start of this roadmap to better security and better DevOps for mobile apps for everyone. So thank you very much for joining.